It's Ketchup Packets.
Hi everybody, I'm Sean.
I'm Nate.
And this is not exactly a Ketchup Packets. Yeah. Is this a Ketchup Packets?
Yeah, sure.
We're the Ketchup Packets people.
Yep.
And this is a bonus thing that we're doing, trying to make here.
Yes, we're trying something new out, and we'll see if it works.
Yes. We finished watching The Expanse a couple months ago now. It's been like 2 or 3 months as time flies. And we decided that we're going to make some additional Expanse content by doing videos about the books. So I have listened to the audiobook of the first novel in the series, as well as the first novella.
And I haven't.
So I'm going to talk to Nate about them and, like, relay them and stuff. We don't know. I didn't think about what I was going to say.
And, you know, like, it's... part of the idea I think we had initially was that we were going to kind of, like, talk about the book as it compares to the show, but it's been, like, years since I watched the first season of The Expanse.
Well, it's the first season and a half, remember, because book 1 ends halfway through season 2. I think a lot of it will come back to you as I talk to you about it. So, yeah, maybe we can just kind of go through me refreshing the story for you, and I can talk about the book in that way. Or, I don't know, I've also got a list of notes that I made, but I listened to the audiobook of this, and it was a little while ago that I finished it now, so I'm not totally sure that I'll remember what all my notes mean.
Oh, this is going to be great.
Yeah, we're going to try that. Okay, so thanks if you're joining us, and if you're one of our Expanse viewers that's back for some bonus stuff, we're going to talk about the books and the differences between the books and the show. So I guess let's I don't have my remote. What do we do?
Let's start the discussion.
Discussion, go. Let's see. So yeah, the book is called Leviathan Wakes, which I think that was the end of season 1, when like the Proto Molecule monster was all in Eros, like made up of all the people, and it came down and grabbed the spy dude. Remember? Pulled him in. Remember?
That was weird. Yeah, I do remember
weird.
that.
That didn't really come back ever.
No, we got no context about that at all.
No. So yeah, there's the book is presented from the point of view of Holden and Miller alternately.
Okay.
Like the chapter will start with one or the other of their names, and it just alternates between the two of them.
Okay.
And so that's an interesting narrative device, particularly because it keeps going back and forth between them, even during sections of the story where they're together and they're in the same place.
Oh, that's fun.
And so, like, it's never a first-person narration. It's always written third person, but definitely when it's a Holden chapter, you kind of, everything is being described the way he sees it and the way he thinks about it. And when it's a Miller chapter, the other way around. So you sort of see what they think of each other when they're together, and the perspectives are flipping back and forth for chapters. So that's an interesting part of it that is only possible when it's a book instead of a TV show.
Yeah, I was going to say, you couldn't really do that in the show. Right?
Exactly, right. Like, the narrative voice is not a tool you have at your disposal on a TV show. You have just sort of there's different narrative structure stuff about the shot composition and all that, but it's an aspect of the book that I found cool.
That's kind of cool, yeah.
And the other interesting thing about the fact that it stays firmly in their two perspectives, the character who is not in this novel at all, the name did not come up one time, Christian Avasarala.
Really?
Did not appear in the first book in the slightest, and that was surprising. I kept waiting for her.
Very strange. Yeah, they made up a bunch of stuff for her to be doing and saying. Like,
well, unless that comes later in the, I assume she's going to be introduced in book 2.
Right. She's a character in the story, I assume, right?
Yeah, and so I'm trying to really think of everything key to the narrative that they had her doing in season 1. I mean, when she's heading off all the Eros, that's in season 2, I guess, but when Eros is coming at the Earth, she's like a big part of trying to launch the missiles at it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, and that happens in this book. Those missiles come out and Fred captures them and stuff like that, but Christian is not in the book. It doesn't ever go to her, and I guess it's a perspective character thing, so I assume she will probably be a perspective character in later novels. Like, I wonder if Bobby Draper is going to be one as well, because we don't really go with her.
Yeah, but I mean, she was doing the power struggle with the asshole guy, right?
Aaron Wright.
Aaron Wright, yeah, the whole time. Who I feel like a lot of his like his stuff in the first 2 seasons of the show would be like almost in reaction to her. Like a lot of the like they were playing off each other a bunch. So was he a character?
No, there's no
There was
like
none of
Earth
that?
politics really at all. It stays with Holden, who goes
so weird.
from the Canterbury to being on the Donager to then going to what's the name of the place in the belt? Their station in the belt. Tycho.
Tycho. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's all that, and then it's Miller on Ceres, and then he goes to Eros, and it's, you know, like, there's really no avenue for the Earth politics to come up, and so that was definitely an interesting part of the overall experience of listening to the book that starkly contrasted with how the TV show works.
The politics were so important in the show. It was such an important piece of like how all the different factions interact. I'm sure there's that stuff in there, but like without a representative of the Earth faction, that all just kind of disappears, right?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because in the book they can talk more about how Holden's actions are having ramifications and reverberations to what's going on out in the solar system and stuff like that. And, you know, Miller can know about it and stuff like that, so his chapters can cover it and stuff, but on a TV show, you really need characters who are going to have a conversation about this.
Yes.
And you can't just have the narrative voice tell you what a character learns about the consequences. And I mean, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a reason to include her sooner, because you can't really just have a narrator as much on a TV show. You need characters who are going to do each of those pieces of your story.
Yeah, and you gotta show what the effects are in some way, which can only really be done in a situation where it's like political stuff. You're right, like you said, with 2 people talking about what's happening.
Yeah, so that's probably a good reason to include Avasarala right from the jump, and she's just a fantastic character.
Yeah.
And it's great to have her all the way through, but yeah,
really interesting.
So there's that, the big no Avasarala thing. Let's take a look at my notes here. I have a thing early on about the gun technology and like the recoil dampeners that they have, and they just talk about this in the book, and it just got me thinking about how the TV show doesn't have as much of a chance often to kind of sit down and describe the technologies that they have to you. You just sort of have to see what they have, and people who have read the books get to get the little treat of seeing, oh, that's this, that's that. But there was just a passage early on talking about Amos's gun having like these things that fire out a pulse going the opposite direction at the exact same time that you fire a shot, so your gun doesn't move as much, you know, because there's less gravity, and so, you know, there's just, it's needed in space.
Yeah, right.
Zero-G guns, I guess.
That's, I can see how that would be important, but I just never really thought about it. And I wonder if
there's no room for that on the show.
Is that illustrated in the show? Like, now I want to go back and watch people shoot guns in the show and like see what it's like.
There might be little bursts that come off it or whatever. Yeah, I don't really know, but that was a specific sequence early on in the first book that I liked.
It's also just annoying when you're watching something and they're supposed to be shooting guns, but the actual like muzzle flashes are like CGI or whatever, but then they don't, like the actors don't do the recoil, so it just looks like they're just holding it and then bullets are just kind of flying out of it without. But
well, you gotta throw shade at The Walking Dead, Nate.
Yeah, straight up. That's a great example.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, that would make sense here then.
Yeah.
Huh.
So there's that. There's the way they described Shed's death was very interesting. They like talked about them being on the Donager and they're in a holding cell or whatever, and it's just sort of describing what the room looks like around them and stuff like that, and that there's a battle taking place. And then a paragraph just starts with, "The round that killed Shed was," you know.
Oh my God, really?
Like, oh, all right.
Yeah. That was a really shocking scene in the...
Yeah, and
like,
I mean,
whoa.
that's a shocking way to do it in a book, too, I guess. Like, you're not prepared for... Because your eyes can see, like, the paragraph break stuff, so in, like, a line in all caps and stuff like that coming if that's going to happen, as you sort of know that you're approaching that. But if it's just I wasn't visually looking at this book, I was listening to the audiobook, but it was just the beginning of a regular length paragraph, and so I think doing that is sort of a way to make it especially shocking in a book, I guess.
Yeah, and it was very sudden too in the show. It was like, oh, he's alive, and then all of a sudden he's not.
Passing him a joint on the TV show, right? Wasn't he trying to pass Holden a joint so he could calm down?
Yeah, something like that.
He was like, I have this. It'll all be okay, and then his head came off.
Crazy.
So, and Shed had blonde hair in the book, but other than that, everyone else, I mean, more or less fit a description that matched the TV show, so it was very hard for me to not just imagine all the actors as the characters.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really get my own picture of any of these people. They all just looked like that. I mean, maybe some of the descriptions would have varied more, but I guess I didn't listen that closely for it because my brain was ready to fill in all of that. I was like, I've got pre-made character models for all these characters. I know what to do.
Don't need to have the book describe. You know what they look like already.
Something my brain kind of does no matter what when I'm reading a book is I will read the character description and my brain will hunt for the closest actor that fits that. And it'll be like, okay, so it's this person. Or it doesn't always have to be an actor. Sometimes it'll be somebody from my life, but it's like whoever looks the most like that person, that's who my brain will. I don't really build a fresh person in my mind when I'm reading a book. I always pull in somebody's face. And so,
well, you got a lot to work with, you know. It's got plenty of people that you've seen in shows and in real life that you could just be like that guy.
Exactly. Yeah, like when I was reading the Harry Potter series for the first time, Mrs. Weasley was always Kathy Bates.
Yeah, okay.
Just like a plump redheaded lady. Okay, I was a kid. I'd seen The Water Boy not too long before, I think. So I was like, funny. Oh, it's her.
Interesting, yeah.
So, let's see. What else in the notes? Miller has, this is a small detail, but Miller's hat is not the same design. It's a fedora on the TV show, right? Miller has a pork pie hat in the books.
It's a pork pie.
You know it as a hat worn by Heisenberg.
Oh, okay.
Which I wonder if that's why they changed it to a fedora on The Expanse, because they're like, we can't give him a Heisenberg hat. Everyone will say that's a Heisenberg hat.
Right.
Because The Expanse started in 2015, I think, which is a couple years after Breaking Bad ended, so it definitely would have known the iconic nature of a pork pie hat. I don't know why, or they just changed it for some other reason, I guess, but it's not quite the same hat that Miller has.
It might be just my bias, too, but I do think that a fedora fits the character better.
Yeah, the old detective. I think a fedora fits a detective, for sure. Pork pie hat fits a meth kingpin.
Right, yes, exactly.
So, yeah.
Just thinking about Miller walking around on the TV show with a pork pie hat is kind of funny in my head.
Yeah, it would be weird.
Yeah.
I realized a while into the book that they were being really sparing with using Miller's first name, and I was like, I can't think of what it is. What is Miller's first name? Is it Josephus? That sounds right, doesn't it?
You know me, I'm already bad with names, and it barely ever came up in the show. And
I think that's his first name. Yeah, like Joseph, but with Joseph and Jesus mashed together.
Joseph. Okay.
Josephus, you know, Josephus Miller. When Miller leaves series, it's his 5th time off the rock, not the first time he's ever left.
Oh, interesting.
Little detail difference. I don't know. Maybe I was just writing down stuff I noticed that didn't exactly match. The Doninger escape felt like it took a long time. It was like many chapters of them still working their way through getting off the Doninger. I don't know, maybe because that was all one episode in the show. It just felt to me like it was a longer stretch of the book than I expected it would be when they were escaping the Doninger. So, I did feel like we were headed to Eros early because that's towards the end of season 1, and I had sort of forgot that it was 1.5 seasons, and so I was like, we're already going there. Okay, that's all, you know, it's kind of the middle of the book, and then I was like, that's because we're going to be plugging further along. So, yeah, the pacing of it definitely felt like it didn't quite match, and also because there was no Avasarala stuff to put in there.
Yeah, so there wasn't all that extra filler stuff. That was a lot of the
definitely
season
it was.
The politics stuff.
I didn't really think about her absence until we were a good chunk of the way through the both of them on Eros together stuff, and I was like, we still haven't even heard her name. Where is she? You know, and so I don't know. It was strange, and I guess that was the biggest takeaway from reading book 1 is Avasarala's absence. That spy guy who was on their ship and then gets eaten by the Proto Molecule, also not in the story.
It just totally come up. Wasn't really that consequential to the story to begin with.
No, and he wasn't in the books at all.
Was a thing that we were wondering, like, okay, so what does that mean though? He just got sucked up. So what is it gonna make him into? Because he had like bionic. Implants and stuff.
Exactly.
So we were like, is that going to be some sort of super space zombie?
Never came up again.
No, he's just bye-bye. All gone.
All gone.
Very weird.
So...
Weird. Why?
So after Holden and Miller get the radiation poisoning on Eros and they're making their way back to the ship together, there's another interesting thing that's like something a book can do that a TV show can't really do. I mean, they could try it, but it would come off in a very different way. There's a sequence that starts talking about Miller's death self and his detective self, and they're like these two inner versions of him, like the kind that kind of just wants to give in to, we're gonna die, we're dying.
Oh, sure.
And the kind that like is still determined on get to the bottom of the whole Julie Mao endeavor, you know?
Right.
And so it just like talks about that dichotomy in a way that would be, I mean, you could do like a Gollum Smeagol kind of thing on TV, I guess, but it would not, it would be much harder to do in a way that didn't come off weird, you know?
Yeah, it wouldn't feel like an existential crisis so much as like, oh, the radiation got to his head.
Exactly.
So much, you know, it would be, you would have to switch off between them rather than have it be an internal like struggle.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. So that was a cool thing that again is just the different strengths of the different mediums. And when I was younger, I feel like I didn't understand as much why you had to change so much about the way it's presented when you move a story from a book to a show. I'd be like, what's so hard? Just put what they wrote down on the screen. But it's again, you don't have the same tools at your disposal, and it just doesn't work the same way. So that's, but yeah. Deimos was destroyed after all the Eros infection stuff, and I feel like it was before on the TV show, but I couldn't quite remember.
I can't remember specifically.
Wasn't that in season 1? I think it was.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe they just move some stuff around on the TV because you need to think about TV schedules and that kind of thing. Again, nature of the medium. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that was beforehand. But maybe not. Maybe that was in season 2. It's been a long time since we watched it again.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
So.
And we watched it one episode at a time, week by week.
In summer 2021.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, let's see. There's more info right up front kind of about what the deal is with the Proto Molecule. Like when they talk to Dresden and have that whole conversation with him, he's that first scientist who's working with it, he kind of gives them more of an outline about what it's supposed to do here and all that stuff, and like it was sent here to repurpose life and stuff like you know, there was more of that sort of, and I think we got several comments definitely when we were around that point in the show of people just dropping that information on us, and I think maybe that was because that's kind of what happens when you're reading the book and the show just didn't fully flesh it out, and so they were like, we're offering that up now.
Yeah, and Dresden he just got wasted pretty much immediately.
He gets killed during that conversation. Miller kills him because he's making sense.
Right. And we were, I remember I was really disappointed. I was like, that guy could have cleared up so much stuff.
He could have, and Miller's reasoning for killing him, which is more or less the same in the book. It's about how, like, I'm not necessarily saying he was convincing me, but if we leave him alive, he's going to convince people.
Yeah, right.
That's the problem, is that he has powerful allies already. And you can't take him prisoner and let him convince someone to let him go.
Right.
You know,
so within the universe, it makes perfect sense, but as an audience member, I was like, come on.
Right, yeah.
He was answering a bunch of my questions.
Yeah. So there's that. The Proto Molecule is always described as like a black goo, and then right when Miller's going in to like talk to Proto Julie and send Eros at Venus instead of Earth, so like towards the whole end of the entire saga, he talks about there being blue fireflies around, and that's the first time there's any mention of any glowing blue stuff. It's just like a dark black goo other than that, and so that's probably more realistic for interstellar,
right?
Bug thing. It would just like, I don't think emitting light, that's not efficient, right? It doesn't need to emit light.
And also just like, it makes it be able to move much more stealthily through space. You can't see something that's black against a black background, especially if it's not like reflective or whatever.
But for a TV show, that's not nearly as visually interesting. I understand completely why they leaned into, they're like, oh, blue fireflies? Okay, so we could say it glows blue. Great.
Yeah. It was an indicator, a visual indicator on the show that like, oh, there's Proto Molecule.
Exactly. That's needed. You can't just have like, oh, there's some black, I think that's Proto Molecule right there.
Yeah.
No, that's coffee grounds. No,
right.
Right, so...
But that also, I feel like, makes it a lot more scary, because it would be able to kind of hide so much more easily. Like, they were able to... There was that part where they had Proto Molecule, like, on the ship, right? And they were able to sort of lift it and then see it clearly. But, like, that could be motor oil.
Lift it up and be like, what is that? Yeah, like, it would be... That's true. And maybe that will come up in the future, because that's how it looks in the books, but, yeah.
Cool.
Eros does that planet necklace thing around Venus before crashing into it, the way that the moons on Ilis were on the show. And so that I thought was interesting, that it's like an indicator of the Proto Molecule structure stuff that we get from season 4 on the show, the way that it like circles all around it before crashing in. That was the last note that I took. But yeah, so I read that book, and then I also read the first novella, which was The Butcher of Anderson Station, which tells the story of Fred Johnson taking Anderson Station and killing Belters, who he doesn't learn until afterwards were attempting to surrender.
Yeah.
That happens a little bit differently than they showed it on the TV show. In the show, they have him like standing on a deck while like a missile was like something detonated the whole place and blew it up, right? In this novella, it's him leading a team that's like taking the station, like commandos.
Okay.
So it's a much more like front to front, like the Butcher title
like,
is
them
much
in
more
cold
directly,
blood.
And well, I mean, like they blew up a barricade that had people on the other side. Like they're not directly face to face, I don't think, but and most of it is told through him relaying the story of it to Anderson Dawes, because it's Anderson Dawes like coming to get him after that's happened, and he's like at a very low point and feeling existentially guilty about what's happened, and Dawes kind of convinces him to become the man that we know him as instead. He's like, you're at a turning point here, you could just go into the abyss, or you can go this direction.
Yeah.
And so, and there's
interesting.
Somebody with Dawes during the novella that apparently Kara G, who's the actress that plays drummer on the show, decided could be drummer there with Dawes. There was no mention of her in these books yet either. And so it was interesting to like that could be her still involved in the story early on like this. But there was Fred, but there was no drummer.
Right. No, I mean, I'm wondering if drummer comes up later.
Maybe. Maybe she's just maybe she's the Expanse's Daryl, where she's the TV show character that became a favorite.
Yes. And she was one of my favorites, too.
I mean, she's the president of the galaxy at the end, or, whatever.
Through weird circumstances, but we'll leave that alone. But that is interesting, though, that they changed it for the show, because, like, okay, and I'm not trying to diminish, like, the loss of human life or whatever, but a bombing or a missile strike feels different than people moving through a space and like massacring people.
Yeah, like which is what it's presented as, I think.
Yeah, and that's I don't know, that's just it's an interesting choice to like, why not just do it that way? Maybe they were saving, it might have been cheaper than having to have all the extra people. And
it is, and you think about it also, this is a novella, it's not part of the main book. That was not like the main thrust of the episode that it happened in. It was like some scenes, some interstitial scenes beyond the main scenes in that episode. And so that's why I think, you don't want to spend a lot of money doing like a whole battle action sequences that requires many more days of shooting and planning. And
I guess it still got across, like, Fred's motivations weren't lost on me because of that change.
Exactly,
like, it's perfectly reasonable.
All you have to shoot is him standing on the platform, and then the dad with his daughter recording the plea messages to the camera. You can shoot that on, a soundstage in an afternoon. So I get why. Again, it's about the medium, and it's about the limitations of what it takes to bring a TV show into existence versus to sit down and write a book.
Right.
So that about do it for our book 1, novella 1 Expanse discussions.
Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if we this is what people were expecting or if this has been satisfying, but it was pretty fun to do, and I definitely intend to continue. I'm going to start book 2 very shortly, so stick around for more of these, and until the next one, I'm Sean.
I'm Nate.
And this is a Ketchup Packets bonus video. Ha ha!
Yeah!